Market conditions will affect your career no matter how prepared you are. Just look at the last 20 years. We've seen a recession, a global pandemic, the rise of remote work, return to office mandates, massive advances in AI and other technologies, and entire industries are growing while others have struggled pretty significantly. None of those changes ever once checked in with the people to see if we were ready. They just happened. Some of the biggest career impacts come from changes that we barely even notice at first. It's not that anything dramatic is happening immediately, except for maybe the pandemic and the recession a little bit. But over time, the market shifts and changes and ebbs and flows. Skills that were highly valued become less important. Competition increases. Opportunities will shift into different industries and specialties. And then one day, we realize that things have changed, even though there was no official announcement. Although some of us do talk about it, it's really not this big flashing sign that everybody understands, but a lot of people are speculating. You cannot control the market, but you can pay attention to it, and you should. You can build relationships, maintain your skills, and make sure you're as prepared as possible if any of these circumstances change. And this is what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to Control Your Career. I'm Julia Toothacre, your strategic career consultant, and I'm so glad that you're here. This season has been all about career leverage, specifically how to expand your opportunities, your influence, and different options that you have in your career without feeling like you have to start over every single time you want something a little bit different. In this episode, we're going to talk about what it means to stay market ready, even if you have no intention on changing jobs anytime soon. We're going to look at how market conditions influence careers, why having more choices changes the way that you make decisions, and some simple habits that make it easier to navigate any kind of unexpected change. We're also going to talk about maintaining professional relationships, a theme through this entire season, staying connected to your industry, and keeping track of accomplishments before you actually need to do something with them. And I have a really fun resource that I'm going to introduce you to. You have to remember, career management does not have to be complicated. We don't want it to be complicated because we want to live our lives, right? Most of the habits that we're going to be discussing today, they take very little time, but we do have to think about them. And the value comes from doing them as consistently as possible instead of waiting until you urgently need them, which unfortunately so many people have been in that space in the last number of years. All right, let's get into it. Okay, one of the hardest realities that I think it's hard for people to accept is that careers are extremely personal for the most part, but overall employment is really about the market. Your career exists within the market of employment and business and what's available and what is happening in the world. And sometimes those things do not align. Sometimes the things that we want to do in our career, there's not really an opening for that, or there's not a need for it, or it's so small of a field that it's really hard to break into. Similarly, the spaces that need a lot sometimes aren't the most desirable, and we don't want to do them, and they're not fulfilling. So there's always going to be that dichotomy between the two and that friction that we feel between the career that we think we might want or the ideas that we have and what's available to us via the market at that time. The market is going to change. It's going to shift and change whether we like it or not. It doesn't matter if we understand why. We can speculate day and night why market shifts happen. I think sometimes they're manufactured, and that's just the situation that we're in, and we have to work within it. We've seen certain industries really explode over the last 10 to 20 years, and we've seen other industries really take a dive. In 2026, which is when this podcast is being released, we are seeing AI really impact what is going on with the market and within different industries. And it's going to be interesting to see over the next 5 to 10 years what happens with AI and how it's going to impact certain functions and certain fields. We look at hiring demand, and there is an ebb and flow that happens within hiring that I think people need to understand. We have an employer market, and this is where the employers have all the power. They are in a space where they don't have to pay as much. They have so many applicants that they can choose whoever they want. They have the choice. Then we have an employee market or an applicant market. And that means that we have the choices. We as applicants have a lot of options in terms of employment, and employers are fighting for talent. And there are some industries where that's kind of always happening, and it kind of ebbs and flows, again, depending on what's going on in the market. But it's important for you to understand within your field and within your industry, what is the hiring demand? I think sometimes people have a hard time understanding this because they have somebody in their life where the demand of their skills and their field is in high demand. And so they get poached, right? They get pulled from company to company because that skill set is in demand. Other people are struggling just to get interviews because their field is really inundated and it's oversaturated. And so that's something that you have to be aware of in terms of the market conditions for your particular situation in your function and your industry. Technology is always going to play a huge role within the market. We look at the Industrial Revolution, that was a huge shift in market conditions, and a lot of people fought against it. And then eventually we adapt and we adapt and we adapt. And then the internet comes along and everybody thought that was going to be a thing, and we adapt and we adapt. Now we're dealing with AI and we're at the infancy of that. And so we're trying to figure out, what does that look like? How do we adapt? And we will adapt because that's what happens. We also have to think about market conditions, not just in a global perspective in terms of what is happening, within the US and throughout the world, but we also have to look within our organizations. So many organizations restructure, or within a certain field, things get restructured, companies get bought and sold and merged together. And there's a lot of things that go on that are outside of our control, but impact what's going on. And we have to be aware of those things, especially as we're applying into positions. We have to do our homework to understand what is going on within the industry and within that organization, especially if it is a much larger organization. The other thing that is really going to impact market conditions, and I think so many of us are more sensitive to this now because of the information available to us, is the economy. And I think there are a lot of different ideas of the economy strength. I think we hear different viewpoints depending on where you get your news and what reports you're looking at. And at the end of the day, you really have to be looking across the board at what's going on, but then you also have to specifically be looking at your industry and how is the economy impacting your industry. Because one industry might be doing very well and benefiting from the current economy. Another industry is going to be struggling. And then there are the industries in between that might feel a trickle-down effect, but we just never know. And some are just completely untouched from what is going on in the economy. That's not usually true, but it depends on the scenario. So really understanding that information. And I think what's hard when it comes to the market in general is, for a lot of us, this is not something that we're interested in. It's not something that we really want to spend a lot of time talking about. But if you are really serious about your career, if you really want your career to grow and you want to understand where opportunities are and what it's going to look like within the work that you're doing, you have to be aware of these things. And I think this is where we're having different conversations at different levels in terms of what do you want out of your career. And the higher you go, you have to be able to have these conversations within your organization. So I mentioned a couple of different impacts over the last 20 years, and I want to go a little bit deeper into that because I think some of you, especially who are more early career professionals, don't know what happened. And I think understanding how many shifts we have seen over the last 20 years, I think will help you put into perspective how quickly things move, right? So we had the 2008 recession, which that was a multi-year impact in terms of jobs and the employment market. The employment market got flooded. And I will tell you the difference in 2008 that I saw because I was coming into higher ed at that time. Higher ed got flooded. So a lot of people went back and got master's degrees, or they finished degrees, or they got a doctorate degree. Like, we had this influx of additional education in 2008. That is impacting us now because we have a lot of people who are highly, highly educated who can't get work in the field that they're in for other reasons, right? One of the other things we saw was the rise of, honestly, social media, and specifically on the career front, the rise of LinkedIn and online networking. Now, you can love or hate LinkedIn, it doesn't matter, but LinkedIn was a really big impact to careers because it allowed us a professional space to be able to talk about who we were and talk about what was going on in our careers and connect with other professionals. And so it really allowed people to expand their networks. Now, do I agree with everything that LinkedIn is doing now and what it's turning into? Not really. It's trying to be social media in the way that Instagram and TikTok are social media, and that's not what it was built for. So in a perfect world, I wish it would kind of pare back some of what it's doing. But at the end of the day, it is still a really helpful tool for those who understand how to use it and can get over some of the noise and things that's happening. We've also seen the growth of remote work, and this is also because of the growth of the internet, honestly. And I know some of you were like, Julia, the internet's been around forever. Yes, but using the internet, putting everything online intentionally, that has really been in the last like 15 to 20 years. You know, when I started in higher education 15 years ago, we still had a lot of paper. We used a lot of paper. We used a lot of paper forms. We had not shifted everything online yet. And that happened significantly while I was in higher ed in my early years. And so that was in the last 15 years. That was 15 years ago. So think about that. That's still relatively young in the grand scheme of things. So the growth of remote work, I think, has happened because people realize how flexible certain positions can be. And I think some organizations have realized that they're going to save a lot of money if they don't have the overhead. But again, that's only been recently. It hasn't been for a really long time. So a lot of companies still have that real estate that they have to deal with. We saw that massive shift into remote work because of COVID, because of the pandemic. That was also a wake-up call to a lot of people because it made us go, oh, my company can do this. This is something we can make work, and we did it really quickly. And people are on to that now, that shifts can happen quickly if we need to. We just choose not to. Coming out of the COVID years, we saw return to office mandates, which nobody liked. Some people did, but most people didn't. But we saw that shift happen really quickly. And we saw how not only did employees suffer from that, but certain organizations suffered from that. The difference is the organizations don't care. And I think that's one of the differences that we're seeing now in in the market that we're in is the larger organizations know that they're going to be able to hire people. They do not care about their image anymore because there's always going to be somebody that is going to need a job. And that is the hard truth of what companies are thinking about. I think it's interesting with AI, that's kind of what is impacting everything right now. And so we will see that shift over the next 5 to 10 years. I think in the next 5 years, we're going to see significant shifts because we've seen a lot in the last year. So the shifts are becoming quicker and shorter, shorter in between bigger shifts. And so that makes it also really hard to manage market conditions because things are happening so quickly that it's hard for, I would say, the average person to keep up if you're not already keeping up with all of this information, right? So one of the things that I want you to think about is I want you to think about your current career situation, and I want you to understand the market conditions, what is within your control and what is not. And I would wager to bet for a lot of you, there is a lot outside of your control in terms of what is available and what is happening within your field. So the work that you're doing and then within the industry. So that's where your company lies within the broader industry. All right, let's talk about choices. This is always so interesting because I think people think that they don't have choices, and they do, but sometimes there are limitations to that. So you are ultimately going to make different decisions when you have choices, when there's something to choose from. But it's also important to remember that not everybody has the same scenario and the same situation. And so you might be, on paper, you might look very similar, but behind the scenes, things are going to look a lot different for you. It's important to note that some professionals are going to have a financial cushion. And that means that they might be able to take a lower paying position and it's not a big deal. And they might be undercutting market value because of that. And that's very different from somebody that really needs to be making a certain amount of money because maybe they're the breadwinner in the family, or they've worked really hard and they know that their skills are worth something. And there's a dichotomy there that's hard. And this is where companies are taking advantage of people because they know that that exists. And that's what you have to think about. And is it fair? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It is not fair, but that's the reality. And that's how people think. Employment markets. So where you live, the area that you live in. Some of you live in markets that are alive and well and thriving and have a lot of opportunity in the field or industry that you're interested in. Some of you don't. Some of you live in areas that are a little bit more rural, or the industry just doesn't exist there. And so you have to think about that when you choose a career. Can you be where you want to be, or do you have to move? Some people understand that, but other people complain about the market, but the thing that they want to do is not available in the place that they live. So being realistic about what is available and what makes the most sense. Some of you have amazingly transferable skills. You've been doing some things for a long time. You're able to articulate what you've been doing, all of that. Some of you are in a place where you have a really narrow specialty. Now, that can be an advantage as well. It just depends. And I think this is part of where it depends on who you are, what choices you have, and it depends on your reality and what you want, what choices you have. And I think a lot of times we go, oh, I wish I had this. I wish I had this. Okay. You can't do anything about that. So you have to look at, this is who I am. These are the situations I'm in. This is what's available to me. And this is what I have to work with. And some of you want something that's just not available to you in the area that you are in. And I'm not, there are larger market things going on, and I'm not dismissing that at all. But we also have to make some more realistic choices around what is available to us. Okay. Not everybody is going to have the same resources, the same responsibilities with family, or even the same opportunities given a lot of different factors. And so that has to be taken into consideration as we're having this conversation about market conditions, because I can blame the market all day long. But the reality is, I live in a certain area that has certain advantages and certain disadvantages. And I have to be aware of that. And you have to be aware of that as well. I think it's worth noting too that if you feel like you are trapped, you're going to stay in whatever situation you are longer, even if you're miserable with it. When you understand what choices you have, even if they are minimal, you can make more intentional decisions, and you're not going to rely on fear. And I think that is part of the thing, is we think that, oh, there has to be all these millions of jobs and positions available. There doesn't need to be that, but there has to be options within the thing that you want to do in the area that you want to do it in. And if there aren't any options, then it's going to feel like you're trapped. It's going to feel like you can't get out. So understanding that is going to be really helpful for you. Okay, let's talk about habits. Habits is something that I am talking about in the book. I have a whole section devoted to habits. So I'm going to do a high level overview of some career habits that I think are really helpful, because most professionals, you're not neglecting your career. I don't think it's intentional. I think sometimes we just get very complacent, and so we stop maintaining certain things that we were doing in the beginning, especially when we were in early career. When we're in early career, we're excited. We want to meet people. We want to go to all the events. We want to do everything. Then you get into mid-career and you're like, I don't really care. And it's probably because you're tired. Maybe you've started a family. Maybe you have other commitments and things that are going on. But at the end of the day, a lot of times we do just get complacent. And so this is for those people that feel a little bit like, oh, I'm not doing anything to forward my career. So here are some examples of some habits that you can just start. You don't have to start all of them, like pick one. But here are a few examples. So one, staying in touch with former colleagues that you liked, okay, that you think would be a good connection for you. Obviously, if they're not, they're not. I think you can stay in touch with people just because they're good people, but also be aware of who has been a champion for you and stay in touch with those people. Do a little coffee chat if you're local, or do a little Zoom if you're not. Track your accomplishments. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. Reflect on your career goals. I would say at least once a year. Think about what you want out of your career, and are you happy with where you're at. Some of you need things to be easy right now because of the situation that you are in, and that's totally fine. Just know that. What skills do you need to develop? What's going on? What's the next step for you if you're ready to make the next step? And what skills do you need to get there? And how can you put that into motion, either in your organization or with additional training? Look at industry trends. I think this is the easiest one. Like once or twice a week, do a little search on your industry and see what's going on. Set up a Google alert to get, different articles and things that are going on within your industry, just so you understand what's happening, or follow people who report on these things within your industry on LinkedIn. update LinkedIn every so often, go in, just like make some tweaks, update some things, even just engaging on LinkedIn, I think is really underrated in terms of your visibility. And so definitely make some time to do that if that's a platform that you are okay using and you see the value in. And then update your resume at least once a year. I would say once a quarter, just do a little look over, but at least once a year, go over your resume, add things to it, update, just so that you can keep it as current as possible. So, again, really simple. I'm not going into detail with any of that. I'm going in depth with career habits and habits in general in my book. Don't worry, my book is not a habits book, but it's part of the process and it's something that we have to talk about. And I'm going to share a lot about my journey and things that worked for me and all of that. So what I would love for you to do of that list is pick one thing and do that over the next month and see where it goes, and then pick another thing and then pick another thing and just keep going. Let's talk about visibility. This is something that we have been talking about throughout this entire season, and that's part of what really fueled me to do a season on this topic. And visibility was one of the main things because I think so many people are not visible, and you're not visible within your organization. And then you're especially not visible within your industry. And I think, again, that's a little bit of complacency. I think it's also a little bit of just not knowing where you want to go and what you want within your career. But a lot of people that want to move up, that want to move out of their organization, they need to have visibility within the industry. And one thing I will say is this is not about becoming an influencer. I'm not saying to do that. That's such a route that you have to really want to do that. And for some people, it can really hurt your career if you take that route really intentionally. What I'm talking about is being intentional within the industry. So that could be participating within a professional association. I think that is the easiest. And I think, honestly, one of the best things that you can do, especially locally. Obviously, if you're looking to do more, getting involved with like the national group is good, but locally, I think is really helpful to understand what is going on within the industry in your area, but also be able to make those connections. I think speaking, and some of you are going to push back because you don't like speaking, and I totally get it. But if you're at a certain point in your career and you want to go to a different point in your career, taking on some speaking engagements, even small ones, is really helpful. If speaking freaks you out, get on a panel. Panels are so much easier because you get questions in advance. You can talk from your experience, and it's such lower stakes, and again, gets you out there. So really consider different speaking opportunities in that way. Share your observations around the industry or the field. This is where LinkedIn is really helpful. You don't have to do it in a cringy way. You just share what's going on. I think sometimes you can connect it to the organization that you work for if you're allowed to do that, but really just look at your own experiences or look at what's happening in the market and have commentary even on other organizations. Start attending events. Some of you aren't going to like that. That's fine. But especially local events, usually connected to a professional association, is really helpful. Also, just attending larger industry events, I think, is a really great way just to put yourself out there. And just connecting. I think connecting with people who are in your field, who are thought leaders. So many people want to have those conversations. They want to have intelligent conversation around what is going on in their field, in their industry. And so sometimes just connecting with someone and saying, hey, I'd love to have this conversation with you, is a really great way to connect and make yourself known a little bit more in your industry. Okay, I have a fun activity around this that I love doing. One thing that I think is really helpful is we understand what happens when somebody searches our name online. Now, some of you are going to have really basic names, so it's not really going to matter. But if you have a more unique name, then I want you to search that. One thing you could do if you have a basic name is search your name in your field, search your name, your company, your name and your title, and see if anything does come up. The reason that I want you to do this is because, one, you need to see what is being said about you online. Because if somebody searches you, you need to understand the narrative that they're getting. Also, AI is combing a lot of this information. So, for example, if you predominantly use Google and use the search engine and you put a name in or put something in, the AI is right at the top. So, what is it saying? Is it saying the right things? Is it accurate? Like, you need to understand that. So do a little search on yourself. This is especially helpful if you are much further into your career and you have done some different speaking engagements and things like that. Definitely know what the internet is saying about you. Okay, let's talk about keeping track of different things within your career. This is so important when it comes to market readiness because I think that we underestimate how much we forget. And I don't know about you, but there's a lot of information throughout my career that I, even to this day, could not give you the information in numbers, and I will never be able to find out. And so one of the things that I think is really helpful is keeping track of all of this. But I also understand that there's a lot of barriers to keeping track of information. We have to be reminded to do it. There needs to be a place to do it. So we can't really use our work computer because that belongs to the company. And what happens if we get fired or let go or something? We might not have access to that. But then if we keep it at home, then sometimes we forget to update it because we're at work and we're thinking about it. Anyway, there could be a lot of barriers to tracking information. And one of the things that I want to talk to you about is a new product. It's called Career Capital. I do not get paid in any way to talk about this, but I am an advisor for the organization. But again, there is no monetary compensation for anything that I'm saying today. I just support my friend Orlando so much because I feel like this is such a needed product for people. I think this is a service that is really going to be helpful for people to track different accomplishments. So, what do you need to be tracking within your career? Accomplishments, number one. Anything that you accomplish, which that can look different depending on your field. So I'm not going to go into details on that. Metrics, any numbers that you have, helpful to have. Even if you are in a field that's not necessarily numbers heavy, you need to try to quantify as much as you possibly can. You want to keep track of projects. Even if the project wasn't a big win, sometimes just what you do throughout that project and the part you played is helpful. You want to track feedback. Any feedback that you get, even emails and little notes and things like that, you want to keep track of. You want to keep track of skills. What trainings have you done or what skills have you developed over the last few months? Any wins, anything that you consider a win, you want to keep track of that. And then lessons learned. I think this is so underrated, but every time we go through something professionally, there's a lesson in it, and it's helpful to keep track of that. So my friend Orlando Haynes, he has a product called Career Capital, like I said, and this helps you keep track of all of these things. What I love about it is not only can you use it to update your resume, but you can also use it for performance evaluations. So it allows you to keep track of all of these things. And because it's online, you can access it at work and make those updates, and then you can access it at home. So it's really easy to have access to it when you need it. But I love it so much. It puts a report together for you if you want it to, but it houses all of this information. And I know that he is constantly making updates. It launched in May of 2026. And oh my gosh, it's such an amazing platform. And I encourage you to check it out. I will make sure that there is a link in the show notes in the blog post for this episode. But connect with Orlando, test it out. There's a free trial. I highly recommend, if keeping track of your accomplishments is a barrier for you, then this is definitely something to consider. All right. Here's the question that I think everybody has been asking more recently because of what has been going on in the market. What would happen if you needed a new job tomorrow? Most people do not expect to be laid off. Most people don't expect to be laid off multiple times over 3 or 4 years. But that's the reality for so many people right now. And it might not be your reality. You might be fine. I have clients who have gotten jobs within a month or two. So it's not everybody's reality, but it's a lot of people's reality. And we have to understand what's going on because it can just as quickly happen to you. You just never know. So if you are employed right now and you do not believe that you are going to be laid off anytime soon, here are the questions that I want you to answer for yourself. Can you explain the value that you bring to an organization succinctly and clearly? Can you update your resume quickly? And when I say quickly, I mean within 12 to 24 hours. Can you identify really strong references that can help you out quickly within a couple weeks to a month? Can you talk about your transferable skills? I'm going to go into transferable skills more in the next episode, so stay tuned if that's something that you need a little more information on. Would you feel comfortable reconnecting with people who you knew from the position you got let go from or from people in your past? Do you have relationships with them already? And then can you explain what type of role you would want to get into next? So being able to answer those questions will let you know whether or not you are somewhat prepared if something were to happen. Obviously, we don't want that, but we all have to be prepared because the market can change so quickly. We saw that happen in 2020 in a way that we really didn't see in 2008, 2009. So we have to be prepared to some extent. And I would say that's the difference now between 10 to 20 years ago from a career perspective is these days, you have to be prepared that you could get let go at any minute. And I never used to talk about that ever. But that is the situation that we are currently in. Now, I hope that sometime from now, I can do another podcast episode saying something differently. But as of right now, I don't see that changing, which is unfortunate. But that is the situation that we are in. These market conditions are going to continue to change throughout your career. New technologies are always going to be emerging. AI is just the start. Who knows at this point where that's going to go. You know, industries are growing and other industries are shrinking. Orgs are going to restructure. We're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of restructuring happen, especially within tech. And hiring is going to ebb and flow as it does. So these are all realities that all of us are going to have to deal with. And you have to pay attention. And some of you don't want to. Some of you want to ignore everything. And I understand that. But you cannot ignore what is happening in the market, especially if it impacts the career that you want. There are some simple habits that you can maintain, and that will help in terms of if there's a surprise that happens, like a layoff or anything else. Sometimes just life happens, right? And if you can maintain some of those habits, it's going to be easier for you to make that transition if you have to do that. Staying connected to people, documenting accomplishments, just being aware of the industry trends as much as possible, and even continuing to build skills that maybe you're like, I don't know if I need this. Some of you are pushing back on AI saying this is never going to impact my industry. Never say never. Never say never. Learn it. Even if you don't want to use it, at least understand it. But all these habits, they will help you in the event that your circumstances change and you need to be prepared. And you don't have to have this perfect plan for every possible scenario. This isn't me trying to scare you into being over prepared. It's not about that. It's about just having a little bit of awareness and a little bit of maintenance. And I think that that will help a lot of you just feel better in the event that you're ready to make a change or in the event that something happens. So as you go through your week, I want you to think about some of these areas that you've been wanting to maintain within your career, something that you know you've been putting off, but you want to put a little bit more time into. And just pick one thing. Pick one thing. I've given you a ton of things to think about in this episode. Pick one thing and do that. Your small actions today are going to help create that flexibility for you later and those choices that's going to lead to better decisions. So make those choices now. Next time, we are going to be wrapping up this season and we're going to talk about career pivots. That's why we're going to be talking about transferable skills and specifically why some pivots are going to strengthen your career and others might create some unnecessary risk. We're really going to get into it. I'll see you next time. And remember, you control your career.